Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep, really deep, into a period of Indian history that, frankly, still shapes the world today.
That's right. We're talking about the decline of the once mighty Mughal Empire and the, well, almost unbelievable rise of British rule in India.
You know, it's strange to think about, isn't it? I mean, a trading company, the East India Company, becoming an empire, how does that even happen?
It really is a remarkable story. You have these incredible forces at play, internal struggles within the Mughal Empire, the ambition of this company, and, well, let's just say some clever maneuvering on the part of the British.
So let's start with the Mughal Empire. They were at one point this massive power, right? What led to their decline?
Well, the Mughals had ruled over large parts of India for centuries, but by the 18th century, things were definitely starting to unravel.
Unravel, how so?
Well, you have to remember that empires, they aren't these monolithic things. They're complex. There are always pressures from within. One of the big factors in the Mughal decline was this system called the Jagirdari system.
Jagirdari.
Yeah. Basically, it was a way of managing the vast Mughal territories. The emperors would grant land, these jagirs, to nobles in exchange for military service and, loyalty.
Okay, so a way to keep things under control.
Exactly. But over time, these nobles, the Jagirdars, they started to become more and more independent. They had their own armies, their own power bases. So it was like, imagine building this huge, intricate structure and then having pieces start to, come loose.
Makes sense. So you've got these internal weaknesses developing, but what about the Mughal emperors themselves? Surely they must have seen what was happening. Couldn't they have done something?
Some of them did try. There were attempts to centralize power, to reform the administration, to rein in those powerful nobles, but often they faced a lot of resistance. And then, well, there's the human element.
Oh, right, like individual personalities and all that.
Exactly. Some emperors were more interested in, say, the finer things in life, courtly life, art, music. They might have neglected the more mundane but crucial aspects of running an empire. Others were caught up in internal rivalries and power struggles. So it wasn't always a lack of awareness. Sometimes it was a lack of action.
Okay, so you've got this empire that's weakening from within. And into this scenario steps, well, a trading company, the East India Company.
Mm-hmm.
How did they go from buying and selling goods to basically running a country? Seems crazy when you put it like that.
Right. It does seem crazy, but that's what happened. Initially, the East India Company, they were focused on trade. They wanted spices, textiles, all the riches that India had to offer, but they were also incredibly strategic. They quickly realized that they could exploit the weaknesses within the Mughal Empire to their advantage.
Well,
yeah, not necessarily in a purely malicious way at first, but they definitely saw opportunities. They started playing different factions against each other. They'd forge alliances with one ruler against another. And slowly, gradually, they started building up their military presence. They had their own armies made up of Indian soldiers known as sepoys. It wasn't this sudden takeover. It was this very gradual process.
and I guess a key moment in that process was the Battle of Plassey in 1757.
Absolutely. That battle, it's a real turning point. The East India Company, led by Robert Clive, they defeated the Nawab of Bengal, who ruled over a very wealthy and powerful province.
So this was a major victory.
Oh, it was. But it wasn't just the military aspect. It was the psychological impact. You have to imagine, here's this trading company defeating a powerful Indian ruler. It sent a message. It showed the growing strength of the East India Company and really, I think, emboldened them to pursue even more power.
And that power, eventually, it leads to the establishment of the British Raj, right? So they go from this company to this, I guess you could call it an empire.
Yeah.
How did that transition happen?
It's a process, right? It wasn't an overnight thing. There were these key events like the Sepoy Mutiny in 1857, which really shook things up. The Sepoys, they rebelled against the British. It was a brutal, bloody conflict.
So that was a wake-up call for the British.
In a way, yes. It forced the British Crown to reassess how India was being governed. And in the aftermath of the mutiny, they decided to take direct control. So company rule ended, and the era of the British Raj began. It was the start of direct British rule in India.
Yeah, the British, they didn't just, take over. They started making changes.
Oh, absolutely. They implemented all sorts of new systems. They introduced new legal systems, modernized infrastructure with, railways and telegraph lines. They overhauled the education system. It was a period of massive transformation in India.
So on the one hand, you've got this modernization drive. But of course, there's the other side of the coin, right? The exploitation of resources, the suppression of Indian culture. it's a mixed bag, isn't it?
It is. It's complex. The British, they implemented policies like the doctrine of lapse, which allowed them to annex states that didn't have a direct male heir. They introduced new land revenue systems, which often had pretty devastating consequences for Indian farmers. And then there was the whole issue of cultural suppression.
Cultural suppression.
Well, the British, they often tried to assert their own culture as superior, They sometimes discouraged Indian traditions, languages, and ways of life. It was part of this whole idea of, the civilizing mission of the British Empire.
But surely the Indians didn't just, accept all of this passively.
Oh, absolutely not. Resistance to British rule, it grew and evolved over time.
What forms did that resistance take?
It really varied. In the early days, you had these uprisings, often led by local chiefs or rulers who had lost their power. But gradually, things became more organized. Political parties emerged, advocating for greater autonomy or even complete independence.
And figures like Mahatma Gandhi, he played a key role, didn't he?
Absolutely. Gandhi, he emerged as a leader of the independence movement, advocating for nonviolent resistance, civil disobedience. He was a powerful voice, and he really captured the world's attention. But it's important to remember that the independence movement, it wasn't just one monolithic thing.
Different groups, different goals.
Exactly. There were those who wanted dominion status within the British Commonwealth, others who wanted complete independence. There were religious leaders involved, and different regions had their own unique struggles. It's a really complex and fascinating tapestry.
And ultimately, this long struggle, it culminated in, well, a very significant and also very complex event.
Yeah.
The partition of India in 1947. This created the independent nations of India and Pakistan. So did the partition solve the problems it was meant to, or did it create new ones?
The partition, it was a really tumultuous event. It resulted in mass displacement, violence, and it left behind these enduring tensions. Millions of people were uprooted from their homes, forced to migrate. It's a stark reminder that the legacies of empires, they're rarely simple or easy to resolve.
It's such a powerful reminder, isn't it? That history, it's not just a bunch of dates and events. It's about people, choices, and consequences. And the consequences of this period, they're still felt in India and Pakistan today.
They are. This whole era, from the decline of the Mughals to the rise and fall of the British Raj, it shaped so much of the political landscape, the social fabric, the very identity of these nations.
It's a reminder that the past, it's never really past, is it? It shapes the present in all sorts of ways.
It really does. And understanding this period, it helps us understand the world we live in today.
So much to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a truly pivotal chapter in history. What surprised you most in this journey through the end of the Mughal era and the coming of the British Raj?